Hello, welcome to Creatureville, I'm Jeff. Today I'm going to show you how I made a package for my own Madball. In my previous video I showed you how I sculpted and painted my own Madball. I thought a nice, quick and easy follow-up would be to make a cool box for it, but I was wrong. This thing took so much more effort than making the Madball itself. But that's how these things go sometimes. Okay, so I recently went to Costco and I bought a gigantic candle and it came in this box and I was about to throw it away and I realized like, oh wait, this is kind of the right proportions to the box I want to make for my Dracula Madball. Obviously it's way too big, but I think I'm just going to basically take the same outline and make a template and just shrink it down to the size that I need it. So first things first, I gotta measure my Madball. I'm just gonna take these calipers and I'm gonna measure the big guy first. I think I might just take a photo of this and then trace it in Illustrator. In Adobe Illustrator, I took the photo of the flattened box and set it as a template layer and then traced over the outline of the original box. Once I had the outline finished, I was able to scale it down to the size of the Madball. I printed the template out on some cardstock paper and cut it out with a ruler and X-Acto knife. Then I scored the fold lines with a ball stylus that's made for sculpting. This way, the cardstock would fold cleaner and easier than just folding it by hand. This first mock-up was made just for sizing purposes, which is why there are no graphics yet. If the size was wrong at this stage, I could just resize it in Illustrator and print out another one without wasting a lot of ink and time. I decided to add some cardboard inserts to the top and bottom of the inside of the box. This way the sculpture wouldn't move around inside. I got this idea from Christmas ornament packaging. The inserts have circles cut out of the center with little tabs cut and folded down to keep the sculpture in place. Once I folded and glued the box together, I marked where the inserts were on the outside of the box. This way I didn't accidentally cut too much and show the inserts from the outside. I started doing a rough cut of the window with an X-Acto knife. I wouldn't recommend cutting it this way. It would have been safer to just unfold the box, flatten it out, and cut it on a cutting mat. Luckily, I didn't cut myself doing it this way. I did a quick sketch of how I envisioned the artwork on the box would look. I had the idea of making it look like green slime was oozing down from the top and settling at the bottom. You'll see as the video goes on that the design changed and evolved throughout the process. The next step is to do an original illustration for the graphics on the box. Something about a hand-drawn illustration looks more interesting to me than a photo of a character or the toy itself. Once I was happy with the sketch, I added a new layer and inked it with a hard black line. Once that was done, I added color and the illustration was finished. I know this character isn't original. Dracula is a pre-existing public domain character, but I would like to create a few more that I've thought of myself. I've been thinking about 3D sculpting this one that I drew a few years ago, as well as making up a few more. But I have several other projects on my list that need to be done before I get to that. Now that the illustration's finished, I can move on to the graphics for the rest of the box. Throughout this video and the last one, I refer to this sculpture as a Madball. But to be clear, this obviously isn't a Madball. It's a Madball-inspired sculpture. In other words, it's a knockoff. But that being said, I can't officially call this a Madball on the package, so I had to come up with my own original name. There have been several knockoff Madballs over the years, so a lot of names have already been taken. There's Blurp Balls, Crazy Balls, Monster Balls, Wacky Balls, Freaky Balls, and Bad Balls, just to name a few. I was originally going to call them Grossos until I saw that there's a dinosaur toy line called Gross Mo's, which is almost the same name. From there I thought of calling them Creepos, and even started designing a logo for it. But I eventually decided to go with the name Freaky Faces. The next step was to come up with a logo. I decided to draw a logo from scratch, but I didn't like anything I was coming up with. So I abandoned the hand-drawn logo idea and decided to just go with a font. I eventually came up with something I was happy enough with, until I realized I'd used a personal use only font. Even though this won't be mass-produced, I decided to just use something else. So I found a 100% free font on dafont.com and came up with a logo I was happy with. I wasn't crazy about the original design idea with the brick wall, so I decided to change it to a black and yellow caution look. I designed all the graphics in Adobe Illustrator. I feel like it's easier to make changes in Illustrator for something like this as opposed to Photoshop. But there really isn't a right or wrong way to do this. It's just whatever feels most comfortable. Even though I'm the right age to have been a big fan of Madballs when they were first released, I actually never owned one as a kid. But I did watch the 2 VHS tapes they released back in the day, and have become a big fan in my adult life. My favorites are Hornhead and Slobulus. I actually thought this looked pretty cool, but it didn't really match the Dracula toy I'd made. I imagined this being part of a line of other Freaky Faces toys, but because I only had this one character, it seemed wrong to give it a toxic waste look. So I changed it to neon pink and purple stripes. To me, it made the design look less like toxic waste and more like just a fun toy. Okay, so here's the progression so far. You can see all the changes that I made with the colors and everything. And I changed this because you could see some of the white coming through, like the little top piece that's inside that's holding the Freaky Face in place. So I had to adjust it so it would cover that, but then also these little pieces here were dangling down, and I was afraid they were going to tear off, so kind of simplified this a little bit. Just side by side of this. Lots of little changes, but this is actually not even going to be the final version. Still some things I need to figure out, but I wanted it to look as if this bottom part that he's sitting in had filled up with slime and it was kind of overflowing out of the box almost. I'm mostly happy with how this looks. I think, I adjust this color so it's not pink and make it a little more purple. I also need to kind of adjust this template a little bit because the lid is not quite long enough. I need it to come to this edge. So that's an easy fix. Yeah, we'll just take it from there. If you look closely, you'll see that I changed the name to Drac Attack. I wanted to give it a name that was a little more unique than just Dracula. I ended up making a few small tweaks to it after this, but overall the design was complete at this point. I got this 11 by 17 sticker paper to print the artwork out on, and I got it from Online Labels, and they sent it in this really cool like plastic protective case to keep the paper from getting bent up in shipping. This is really nice, so check out Online Labels. But anyway, this is 11 by 17 sticker paper. It has a little cut down the back so that it's easy to kind of peel off. And I just printed out all the artwork on one of these. I also made a couple of small changes since the last time you saw it. I added images of the other two colorways that I did and just made the logo a solid color rather than the gradient. So my original idea was I was going to take a cereal box and stick it to this and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife. The only problem is this cereal box, obviously it's already been folded on these lines and it doesn't really line up with this artwork. So I'm gonna have to go a different direction. And I have this gigantic piece of chipboard that I didn't really want to use it because it's a little too thick. I liked the thickness of this cereal box cardboard, but I think the chipboard is gonna work well enough for the sake of this project. So next step is to stick it to that piece of chipboard and cut it out. When I laid the sticky side of the paper down on top of the chipboard, I pressed down from the center and pushed out. This is a trick I learned years ago to help cut down on small pockets of air getting caught under the sticky paper and creating little bubbles underneath. As I said, this chipboard is really thick, so cutting this one out was a lot more work and took quite a bit more time than the other mock-ups did. I had to go over the lines multiple times to make sure the blade cut all the way through. I bought these sheets of clear acetate to use as the window on the box. Normally I'll just take some plastic from like a food container, but this time I decided to just use a nice new clear sheet that I knew would be like the right thickness and big enough to actually like fit on here. So I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of draw it out with a Sharpie and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife, and that should be it. I used Elmer's glue to glue the acetate in place. In hindsight, I probably should have used rubber cement or some other type of adhesive. The Elmer's glue didn't hold very well. Because of the thickness of the chipboard, the paper the graphics were printed on tore at the corners and the fold lines, so I had to try something else. This is basically just like a nice thick piece of poster board. It's not super thick, like it's pretty close to the same size as a regular piece of poster board, but I'm hoping that this will be a better fit for the box, so let's give it a try. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.